Hey everybody, Pinstripe here. Today I've got a texture modding tutorial here for you guys for Hogs of War. This is something I've wanted to go over for some time now, as there just aren't many video tutorials out there on how you can mod your own textures for this game. So before we get started, there's going to be several things you're going to need, all of which you can download in the description below. They are the Hogs of War archive editor. If you have a copy of Photoshop, then please download the TIM-file plugin, or if you have GIMP, I'll be going over that way of how you can just export the files into a image file and open them up in GIMP, because GIMP is free and it's just a bit easier for people who don't have Photoshop. But if you do download the TIM-file plugin, because it's going to be a massive help when we go through this. And finally, XNViewMP, which allows you to just view these TIM files in a different way. Okay, so as we begin this tutorial, as you can see, I've got XNViewMP over here and the Hogs of War archive editor over here. I've got to mention before we start off that you must have Photoshop and the TIM file plugin, otherwise when it comes to finishing your edits or your mods of the textures and converting them back from an image file to a TIM file, you need that plugin. So I would, try and look for maybe a cracked version of Photoshop CS2, because that's the one I'm using. It's from what I can figure out, it's pretty simple to get online. But as I said, the TIM plugin file for it will be in the description below. But we'll get to that when we get to it. So we're going to start off by opening up the Hogs of War editor. I've still got it in a zip file, just because it's simpler that way. It's just on my desktop anyway. So when we open it up, it's going to be very simple looking. Essentially, what it does is it allows you to open up the MTD files in the Hogs of War directory that contain all of the 2D textures for each team. So before we do that, let's have a look at how to get to said directory. So if we start again, if we go from your local files, program files, then head down to Steam Apps, Common, Hogs of War, and then head to the chars folder, which I believe is the characters folder. And in here, it's fairly self-explanatory. You can see all these MTD files, as I said, and they house all of the textures for each team. You can also play around with the other things like Skydome, weapons, team larders in here as well. I've been working on my own texture pack, which I will release to the community at some point when I'm finished doing it. I've only gotten through Team Lard, the British and the French at this point, so we're going to move on to the Russian. As you can see, you've got the MTD file here. So what you want to do is head back to the editor, open up the MTD, which if we navigate to that again, as I said, computer, local files, program files, scroll down, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Hogs of War, and then chars. And if you head to obviously Russian MTD, you open that up, then you want to extract it. I would say make a separate folder for Hogs of War for all your custom things. I've done that, but that's to house some interesting stuff that I have that I'll be showcasing in the future. But what you want to do is, as I said, head to whatever folder you want to make. I've had one that just says Hogs of War references. This kind of houses all of my screenshots and whatnot for each team that I use for thumbnails, but I've got a mod folder and I've created one called Russian. So if you want to extract it into there, you select that folder and then it unpacks everything into it. So then if we head over there, you can see that all of the wonderful TIM files are in here, and this is kind of the secondary file that is what is needed for PlayStation 1s to read texture files, essentially. So you have MTD files that house TIM files that hold the textures. It can get a bit complicated, but having a first look at these TIM files, you can see kind of what you're going to expect from this. You've got Ace up here, which if you watch my Who Was the Ace class video, you kind of understand what's going on here. The Ace class texture was eventually used for the legend, which is why it's called Ace. And then you've got Grunt down here, you've got heavy weapons over here, Legend, which was for some reason called the Legend before it was the Hero, so these are actually the hero textures. So it looks confusing, and it can kind of you need to play around with it a little bit, but essentially all of these equals a certain class. So you've got ME_H, and then you've got Medi 1, Medi 2, Medi 3, Medi 4, Medi 5, Medi 6, and then going on to SA Sabo you think would be Saboteur, but that's actually the Commando, which can, I know, also be confusing. And then you got Sniper down here and Spy to finish off. So all the single player characters that also cross over into the multiplayer as well. So from here, how exactly do you view the TIM files? Well, as I said, you need the Photoshop TIM file plugin to be able to complete the second half of this tutorial, but to view them, you want to open up XM Viewer, ViewMP. It's such a mouthful to say, honestly. But if you file open, if you navigate to the file we were just in, the folder, sorry, we were just in. I keep forgetting where I am. Those are references, HUD, and then, sorry, mod, and then Russian, and then we have them all here. You don't have to select all of them all at once, you can just select one and it will bring them all up, which they are incredibly tiny because Hogs of War textures are essentially pixel art, because I mean that was kind of the constraints of the day, as this game is 18 years old. But as you scroll through them, you can kind of start to see some things that make a bit more sense rather than just a tiny square that is colored in one thing. I'm not going to go over a lot, like all of the textures, because that will get quite confusing, so I'm going to leave it up to you guys to kind of play around with things. But the one piece of advice I can get is that for a lot of these textures, you don't really want to mess around with the base color. What I mean by that is, you know, Red Team has this color red that is used throughout every single texture, so the main base color on the piggy. So every player, every class has the same color, and then all the external things like the backpack, like the belt, they can be changed to completely different colors and it won't mess things up. But if you change the base color on one pig and have it different on another one, it can kind of mix and match them a little bit, and the textures don't really match up very well. So if you're going to have a single base color, have it for every single character and instead edit the external things rather than like the main base bit. If you want to edit the main base bit, like I said, just make sure you apply it to every single class and every single, you know, main base paint bit. You kind of need to know your color palettes in a way, so as I said, I don't want to get things to be too complicated for you guys, but as you can see, look, as you scroll through, you've just got a tiny square. You're like, what is that? What is that for? So you're going to have to play around with it a little bit, but you scroll through them all and you can just see them. Like, this is obviously the heavy weapons one. I also should note that the hat textures are separate for each team. They can be found in the same directory for Hogs of War, in the chars folder. That I believe is just named hats or something like that. So open that up with the editor MDT and then MTD, sorry, and then drop it somewhere else. So you can view them in here. So how exactly do you export them? Well, there's two ways. You can either export it in here as an image file, export that to whatever folder you want. I have then created a separate folder for my enhanced texture pack that I'm working on, that I've been doing, that I've made my way through each team and I've kind of altered the colors of things just to, you know, enhance it a little bit more. So you can see I've changed the color green that is used, and I've changed the other bits as well, just to make it a little bit more interesting rather than just having the same green color. So again, like, it's just a small change, but again, with editing these little bits of pixel art, it can really make a difference. So you can export them all into one file here, or if you, as I said, you need Photoshop, you can simply just open up all of those files, all the TIM files for the Russians in here. So if we just go for the grunts, let's go from GRH1 all the way down to the bottom, and you can just make your way through them. And then from there, say I wanted to work on the main piece, the front piece, which is probably the most self-explanatory piece for the grunt. If I want to work on that, I just save it as a PNG into my enhanced texture folder for the Russians and save it in there. From that, obviously, you can then use GIMP. You kind of work back and forth between Photoshop and GIMP in terms of working with things. So with GIMP, you know, I can just open up what I was just talking about. So I've just exported my grunt front texture, although for some reason GIMP isn't really working for me at the moment. It won't open things correctly and it keeps freezing up, but that might be to do with my editing software. So you can open it up in here, edit it, which we will do instead. back in Photoshop, just to make it easier. Like I said, I got CS2, so it is a bit easier. No, go away. So we open up the image I was literally just talking about, the front section of the grunts. Bearing in mind, when you open them up, once you've kind of converted them to an image file that you can then edit, they will always be in index format. And what that means is, I don't actually know what it means, but essentially you can alter the type of mode it's in. So change it from index color to RGB, and that will allow you to tinker with it. So we're going to just very quickly change the base coat, and that will kind of explain what I mean about changing the base coats of things to make it a little bit more complex, I suppose. We've altered that, which is awesome. And what you want to do is change it back to an index format, because that is what the game needs to read these texture files. They have to be in index. If they're left in RGB and they are copied over and put into the game will just crash on startup, which is a pain in the arse. And from here you can then go ahead, copy that, open up its previous TIM file. So go back to the main folder where you house all the TIM files. And you essentially just reverse upon yourself what it was you were working on. So it's grunt_00, that one's right there. You can see it's an index format. You want to change it to RGB so you can paste in the new layer. Delete the old one, because obviously we don't need that, and then change this back to index. And then from there you can literally just, you're already in the main directory for all your TIM files, so you then just save it and remove black to transparent. You don't need that, but when it brings up the TIM format output, it always has to be in 8-bit, because that's what the game runs in, not 4-bit, anything like that, it will crash it. The game is very temperamental. So as you can see, then we have then exported this, primary texture, I suppose, my example. So we're going to close Photoshop, and then we're going to go back to the editor, which I already have open. So within each TIM file folder, within it has a log file, which essentially is something that allows the editor to kind of combine all of the textures you've just had as TIM files and kind of convert them back to an MTD file. So if we head back to mods, go back to the Russian folder and scroll down, you will see a log file. So what you'll be able to do is then go to open ini, already in the Russian file here, so we go to log file, select that. When you pack it, so when you're packaging this build back up, or packaging these textures together, you must have it exported to exactly the same folder that these TIM files are already in. If you change the folder, it won't be able to pack it. It will crash. That's just an error with this archive editor, which is a pain in the arse. But once it's packed away, you then have, if you scroll down, a Russian MTD file, which, as you remember, is something that can be housed in the char folder. So if we head back through the directories, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Hogs of War, back to chars, you can see obviously we don't have a Russia folder. Well, we do. Here's the original one. If you want to remove that, obviously, and keep that on your desktop, or keep it safe somewhere, because that is, the default textures are in there for the Russian team. That's cool. Keep that, and then obviously import your old one. And that is basically it. So I didn't really want to complicate this too much by going over absolutely everything to do with what this texture is, what this texture is, because as I said, I want you guys to have some form of trial and error with it. But we're going to load up the game so I can kind of show you what is going on and basically show you what we've just done. So here we are in game then. If we head to a new game with, of course, the Russian team, we leave their names and then we see the grunts, you can see that the texture has been added correctly. And as I said, with the 3D model, you can kind of gauge what it is you're dealing with when you're applying those textures. So you can see that front texture, kind of where it ends on the edges of the 3D model, and so on and so forth. So I want to leave it up to you guys to have some trial and error with it. As I said, it can be quite complex, so we are going to recap on it. But before we do that, I want to show you some of my own modding stuff. So let's head to... Actually, we're going to jump in. You got the green team here, which is, as I was saying, I've altered them slightly. The color green, as you can see, is a little bit different. But it's just different enough to be a little bit more interesting, I suppose. And it's the same as well if you know, upgrade them, which I can't because I don't have promotion points. So I'm going to use a little cheat to show you that. So through the power of cheats, I have managed to have some upgrades, which, as you can see, as I upgrade them, I've edited some little bits here and there. The hat, as you can see, is still the same color because, as I said earlier, those are different, that you have to edit separately. And then you can see kind of where the mismatching comes in. You can see the sniper's front here is a bit different compared to his main base color. But as you promote him as well and get to the spy, there you can see the mismatching of the textures, which isn't what I want, so that one isn't completely finished. But I think the main one I am quite proud of is that the commando has a completely different base color. It has its own separate texture, so you can you know, edit the commando to have a completely different color, which I'm quite proud of. It's quite nice. As I said, with these texture packs, I will be uploading them at some point and dishing them out to the community, so we can get some, you know, more modding stuff behind this game. And I will, of course, show you guys my Team Lard as well, because that was probably the first one that I worked on. As you can see, I made them black and green because why not? Yeah, so they're just a little sneak peek. As I said, I will be uploading more detailed things on them in the future. And you'll see them in my videos as well, because obviously I'm not just going to record footage with the default skins, because I mean, that's no fun. I want to show off my work. But once you get the hang of where all the files are and so forth, it can be quite easy to complete a single team in a day. I know that doesn't sound like, you know, short-term easiness, but once you get the hang of it and you kind of know what things are and how you can edit them and what impact it will have if you change the base color on things, then it does get easy. But overall, that's pretty much going to wrap everything up. I just want to have a slight recap before I finish the video, just in case everyone is confused. So just to recap then, you've got to start off by opening up the MTD file that houses the TIM files that are essentially the textures for each team using the Hogs of War archive editor. From here, create a new folder where you will extract these TIM files to, and by using Photoshop with the TIM file plugin or by using XMViewMP, you can view these textures and export them as image files to then be edited. Once you have edited them, open them up with Photoshop along with the default TIM file that you've literally, you know, copied that texture from, and make sure that they match. Set the TIM file texture from index color to RGB color before you then paste it over the old texture. Once you've done that, delete the old texture layer before then changing the new texture into index color mode once again. Save the new texture as the previous one, overwriting it in the TIM file folder that you've already extracted to. Once you've edited the textures you want and you've done the following steps, open up the Hogs of War editor back again and click on Open Ini. Navigate into the folder containing your customized textures and select the log file. Once you've done that, you've got to pack it, but make sure that it is packed into the same folder that you were just in, because if you don't do that, the editor will not work correctly and will probably crash. So once packed away correctly, view the folder containing the customized TIM folders and look for the new Russian.mtd file. From here, you then make your way back to the game's main directory, go to the chars folder, and remember to remove the default Russian MTD file just in case things mess up, or if you want to revert back to the default textures. Once you've dropped it into there, your new custom one, simply launch the game and enjoy your new textures. Overall though guys, that is pretty much going to wrap everything up. I hope you guys enjoyed and could at least follow the tutorial. If things were a bit too complicated or I didn't make much sense on certain things, please let me know in the comments. I know that there are a few other people who have worked on texturing and modding stuff in Hogs of War that are way better than me, because you know I'm still learning as I go. So please let me know if you have any issues in the comments and I will respond in due course. But in the meantime, as I said, that's going to wrap everything up. So let me know your thoughts in the comments and I will catch you guys later for the next one.